I was driving my old teacher, Miss Sarah, to the grocery store when the red and blue lights started flashing behind me. I thought I was just driving a little too fast. But when the police officer looked at my driver's license, his face turned white like he saw a ghost. According to our computer, you died 2 years ago. We need to take you to the police station right now. My heart stopped beating for a second. I had no idea that this simple traffic stop would show me the most terrible truth about my own family. They had done something so bad. It was worse than if they had just forgotten about me. My name is David Martinez. I am 35 years old. I live in a small town called Pine Valley in Colorado, where the mountains touch the sky, and everyone knows their neighbors. People here think I'm just a quiet man who went through something really sad. They don't ask too many questions, and I like it that way. Every day, I wake up early and work at my little bookstore on Main Street. I fix old books, help kids find stories to read, and try to keep my mind busy. But when night comes and I turn off the lights, I can't stop thinking about what happened before. I wasn't always this way. 3 years ago, I was completely different. I lived in a big city and had a life that seemed perfect, but then everything broke apart in one terrible day. Now I'm here in Pine Valley. This is a place where the air smells like pine trees and fresh snow. Old brick buildings line the main street, and every morning you can hear birds singing in the tall trees. I came here 3 years ago after I sold everything from my old life. My big apartment, my fancy car, my expensive computer, and all the dreams I used to have. Now I live in a small house with a red roof and windows that make noise when the wind blows. I like how quiet it is here, but sometimes the quiet feels too heavy. The people are nice, but they keep their distance. They know I came here to hide from something painful. Sometimes I hear them talking about me, wondering about the man who lives alone with his sad memories. I don't get angry at them. If I was them, I would wonder too. Today started like every other day in Pine Valley. I woke up when the sun was just coming up. The morning light came through my thin curtains and made patterns on my wooden floor. I made some hot coffee, ate toast with jam, and fed my cat named Whiskers. Taking care of the bookstore isn't hard work, but it keeps me busy. I dust the shelves, help customers find books, and fix the ones that are falling apart. Everything has its own quiet rhythm, like a soft song, and I've learned to be part of it. In the afternoon, I drove my beat-up truck to the pharmacy in town. Mrs. Johnson, who works there, always says hello with a big smile. "How are you doing today, David?" She asks like she always does. I answered in my usual calm voice. "I'm doing okay, Mrs. Johnson. Thank you for asking." She didn't ask more questions, but I could see in her eyes that she wanted to know more about me. I know she cares, but she doesn't push. I bought some medicine for my headaches, some soap, and some nails to fix my fence, then went home. When the sun was going down, I sat on my front porch watching the pine trees sway back and forth. The smell of fresh mountain air mixed with the sound of crickets making their music. This is my favorite time of day, when everything slows down and I can pretend I belong here. But tonight felt different somehow. When I went inside, I looked at the picture on my table. It was Emma and little Jake, my wife and son, who aren't with me anymore. Looking at that picture, I felt like they were trying to tell me something, and my heart hurt with that old familiar pain. I sat down, picked up the picture frame, and for the first time in many months, I let myself cry. The truth is, I'm not ready to tell my whole story. But tonight, something inside me wants to start. Maybe I'm tired of running away. Maybe I want to be honest with myself for once. 3 years ago, I was 32 years old, living in Denver, Colorado, in a beautiful house with big windows that looked out at the city lights. I was the owner of Martinez Web Design, a computer company I had built all by myself. My company made websites for businesses all across the country. The business magazine called me the young genius of web design. Friends looked up to me, other business people respected me, and I thought I was living the perfect life. I had a shiny black motorcycle in my garage, a collection of the newest computers, and closets full of nice clothes. But most important, I had Emma, the most wonderful wife any man could ask for, and Jake, our 5-year-old son with bright green eyes and a laugh that could make anyone smile. My life back then looked perfect on the outside, but if you look closer, You could see the cracks. Work was everything to me. I woke up at 4:30 every morning, checking my phone before I even got out of bed, and worked until very late at night. Endless meetings, constant phone calls, risky business deals. All of it was like fuel to keep Martinez Web Design at the top. But the price was time. Time with Emma, with Jake, and with myself. Emma was smart and kind. She had long black hair, warm brown eyes, and a voice that always made me feel better. One evening when I came home a little early, she said to me, "David, you need to take a break. Your family needs you." I remember laughing, taking her hand, and promising to slow down. "Just after this busy month, honey," I said. "I promise." But one busy month always became another busy month. Emma didn't complain, but I could see the sadness in her eyes when she ate dinner alone or when she put Jake to bed while I was still working at my computer. Jake, my little boy, was like sunshine in my life. He had curly brown hair, big curious eyes, and always wore his favorite red sneakers. He called them his super fast shoes. Jake loved running around the house, asking me to play soccer in the backyard, or begging me to read him stories before bed. "Daddy, play with me," he would say, pulling on my shirt while I stared at my computer screen. I always said, "Tomorrow, buddy." "Daddy promises." But tomorrow almost never came. I thought I had forever to make it up to him. I was so wrong. The stress didn't just come from work. My parents, Carlos and Maria, were another big problem. My father used to own a small restaurant downtown, but it failed because he made bad choices with money. He owed lots of money to different people. But instead of admitting his mistakes, he always acted like he knew better than everyone else. Every time we talked, he would tell stories about his good old days, then criticize me, saying I was just lucky, not smart. "Be careful, David," he would say. "You think you're so great, but one mistake and everything falls down." My mother, Maria, was different. She cared too much about what other people thought of our family. She bought expensive things we couldn't afford, clothes and jewelry and trips, just to look rich. I was the one paying for all those things. Every month, she would call me, her voice sweet but demanding. "David, can you help your mother? Just a few $1,000s to help your father." I always sent the money, not because I wanted to, but because I felt like I had to. They were my parents, even though sometimes I wondered if they really loved me or just loved my money. The pressure from work, family, and myself kept getting bigger and bigger. Martinez Web Design was doing great, but other companies were trying to steal our customers. The people who invested money in my company wanted more and more profit. I had to make deals with big companies, take big risks, and make sure my business didn't get destroyed by our competition. I stopped sleeping well and started drinking too much coffee and energy drinks to stay awake during the long days. Emma could see I was getting sick, but I told her I was fine. "I'm okay," I said, but I was not okay at all. One night when I came home really late, Emma was sitting on our couch holding Jake while he slept. She looked at me, her voice quiet but serious. "David, you can't keep living like this. Jake needs his daddy, and I need my husband." I wanted to hug her, to promise I would change, but my phone started ringing. A client from New York was calling about an emergency problem with their website. I gave Emma a sorry look and went to another room to answer the phone. When I came back, she was already in bed, and all I could see was her shape in the darkness. During those days, I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, trying to balance work, family, and everyone's expectations. I thought I could handle everything, that I was strong enough to keep it all together. I was terribly wrong. One Saturday, I decided to take Emma and Jake to the park, hoping a fun day would make things better between us. That was the day I lost everything. It was a beautiful sunny morning in Denver, with clear blue skies and white clouds floating by. Emma wore a yellow dress and had her hair in a ponytail, her gentle smile making me forget all my worries. Jake, my little boy, ran around in his red sneakers, carrying his favorite toy robot that he called Robo-Max. "Daddy, I want to go on the big slide today," he said excitedly, his eyes shining bright. I laughed and ruffled his hair. "Okay, little man, today Daddy is going to have fun with you." Emma looked at me, her eyes full of love but also worry. "No work today, right, David?" she asked, her voice soft but pointed. I held up both hands and smiled big. No phone, no computer. Today is just for family. At that moment, I really believed I could keep that promise. We drove to the park in my SUV, going slowly down the tree-lined streets. Jake sat in the back seat, making robot noises and moving Robomax around. Emma told me about her plans to take Jake to the zoo next weekend, her voice full of excitement. "You'll come with us, right?" she asked, putting her hand on mine. I nodded, but my mind was already thinking about next week's important meeting with a big client from California. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, but my voice didn't sound as sure as I wanted it to. Then my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. A call from Mike, my business partner. It's probably nothing important, I thought, and I answered it. Emma looked at me and shook her head. "David, you promise." I held up one finger to signal. Just 1 minute. "Mike, what's going on?" I asked, my voice tense. Mike started telling me about a big problem with one of our biggest clients and money we might lose. I felt that familiar feeling of stress and panic. I tried to focus on the phone call while keeping my eyes on the road, but my mind was full of numbers, problems, and fears. "David, hang up the phone," Emma said, her voice not gentle anymore. I could hear she was frustrated, but I ignored her. "Just 1 second. Honey, this is really important." Jake started singing louder in the back seat, like he was trying to get my attention back. I turned to smile at him, still holding the phone. "Just 1 more minute, buddy," I said. That 1 minute changed everything forever. I didn't see the delivery truck coming from the side street. It appeared like a huge white monster moving so fast I couldn't do anything. A loud horn honked. Emma screamed David. At the same time as a horrible sound of metal crashing into metal, our car spun around. Glass broke everywhere. I felt my body fly forward as the seatbelt cut into my chest. For a moment, everything moved in slow motion. Emma's scream, Jake's scared face, and then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on a stretcher with flashing red and blue lights all around me, making me dizzy. My head hurt really bad, but my body only had small cuts and bruises. I tried to sit up, calling for Emma, for Jake, but a paramedic pushed me back down. "You need to stay still," she said, her voice calm but firm. I didn't listen. I pushed her away and stumbled to my feet, looking around frantically. Our car was completely destroyed. The front was smashed in, the windows were all broken, and then I saw them. Emma was lying still on another stretcher, her face pale, her eyes closed. Jake, my little boy, was covered with a white sheet, but I could still see his red sneakers sticking out from under it. One shoe had come off and was lying alone on the road next to some blood. I screamed and ran toward them, but 2 police officers grabbed me and held me back. "No, you can't go there," one shouted, but I couldn't hear anything clearly. I fought against them, yelling their names until my body gave up and I fell down on the road. The police told me later that the accident was my fault. I hadn't been paying attention because I was on the phone. The official report said, driver was distracted by phone call. Emma and Jake died right there on the street. I lived with only small injuries, but I felt like I had died too. Jake's little red shoe covered in blood was the last thing I saw before I passed out. The days after the accident were like living in a nightmare that never ended. I woke up in a hospital with my body aching from cuts and bruises, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emptiness in my heart. I lay there on a cold white bed, staring at the ceiling under bright fluorescent lights, feeling like my soul had been sucked out of my body. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the white truck coming toward us. I heard Emma scream and saw Jake's red shoe on the pavement. I wanted to scream, to run away, but I was trapped in my own body, locked up by guilt that felt like heavy chains around my chest. I didn't want to talk to anyone or see anyone. The nurses, with their pitying looks and gentle voices, only made me feel worse. I wanted them to leave me alone, to let me disappear into the darkness where I could pretend it was all just a bad dream. My parents came to visit, and I hoped, even just a little bit, that they would comfort me. But when my mother walked into the room, her eyes red from crying as she hugged me, I felt no warmth. She sobbed, but her tears seemed to be for herself, for how this made our family look bad to other people. You had everything perfect. How could you let all get destroyed? She said, her voice crying but angry. Her words weren't comfort. They were blame, like I had destroyed everything on purpose. My father sat quietly in the corner, saying almost nothing, but his eyes were cold and judging, making me feel like I wasn't just a failure, but a criminal. How could you do this to us, David? He asked, his voice quiet but cutting like a knife. I turned away, unable to answer because I had no words to defend myself. Inside, I wanted to scream. I didn't want this to happen. I didn't want to lose them. But I stayed silent, letting their blame mix with a voice in my head that kept telling me I was a killer. Emma and Jake's funeral happened on a rainy day, with gray clouds crying in the sky because I couldn't cry anymore. I stood in front of their two coffins, feeling like my heart was being ripped into tiny pieces. Emma's coffin was covered with beautiful white roses, reminding me of her gentle smile and the time she held my hand and told me everything would be okay. Jake's coffin was so small it made me want to fall down. I imagined him still in there with his curly brown hair and red sneakers, calling me Super Daddy and asking for bedtime stories. But he was gone forever, and I, the person who was supposed to protect him, had pushed him into death. Friends, co-workers, and family members came and whispered sorry things to me. But I didn't look at anyone. Their eyes, whether full of pity or judgment, made me want to disappear. I just stood there getting soaked by the rain, my shoes covered in mud. My hands shook as I held a white flower I didn't remember picking up. I wanted to say sorry, to kneel down in front of Emma and Jake's coffins, to scream that I love them more than anything in the whole world. But the words got stuck in my throat, choked by guilt that twisted like a knife in my heart. I just stood there letting the rain mix with my tears, letting the pain soak into every part of my body, wondering if I would ever deserve to be forgiven. That night, back in our empty house, I sat in the living room staring at Emma and Jake's things. Emma's yellow dress hanging in the closet, Jake's red sneakers on the shelf by the door. I picked up one of his shoes, held it against my chest, and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. My sobs echoed in the cold, empty house like a curse that would never end. I knew I couldn't stay there anymore. Denver, with all its bright lights and painful memories, had become like a prison. I had to leave, to run away, not from the world, but from myself. In the days after the funeral, I was like a ghost walking through my own home. Every corner had memories of Emma and Jake. The kitchen table where Jake ate his cereal every morning. Emma's favorite book lying open on the nightstand. The faint smell of Emma's shampoo still in the bathroom. I couldn't stand it. Every object, every sound, every ray of sunlight coming to the windows felt like a dagger stabbing my chest. The news reporters wouldn't leave me alone. Their headlines cut like sharp knives. Web design CEO in fatal crash. Careless father destroys family. I didn't read the whole stories, but those words burned into my mind like a judgment that needed no jury. The way people looked at me became unbearable. Old friends, business partners, even neighbors looked at me with a mix of pity and blame. He had everything, they whispered behind my back. And look what happened to him now. I didn't blame them. They were right. I had everything perfect. And I destroyed it all because of one stupid moment. Because I thought a phone call was more important than my wife and son's lives. But knowing the truth didn't make the pain easier. It only made me want to disappear completely. I decided to sell my company. Martinez Web Design, the business I had worked so hard to build, was now just a reminder of what I had given up for success. The investors were angry, but I didn't care. I signed all the papers, sold my part of the company, paid off my parents' debts one last time, and used the leftover money to cut all ties with my past. The beautiful house with big windows, the black motorcycle, the expensive computers, everything was sold. I kept nothing except one family photo and Jake's red sneakers. They were the last pieces of my old life, pieces I couldn't let go of, even though looking at them hurt every single time. I chose Pine Valley, Colorado, as my hiding place. I had visited there once when I was young, on a camping trip with my college friends. I remembered the tall pine trees, the clean mountain air, and the simple people who didn't care about money or fame. Pine Valley, with its peace and quiet, seemed like the perfect place to disappear. I bought a small wooden house at the edge of town, with a red roof and windows that creaked when the wind blew. The house was tiny, just big enough for one person. But for me, it was like a whole world. A world where I could hide from other people's eyes and even from my own reflection. In my first days in Pine Valley, I barely left the house. I sat in the dark with only a small lamp for light. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the white truck rushing toward us, heard Emma scream. I would wake up covered in sweat, my heart beating so fast I thought it might explode. I started drinking alcohol, not because I liked it, but because it made the nightmares quieter, if only for a few hours. But even alcohol couldn't erase the guilt. I asked myself 1,000 times, if I had hung up the phone, if I had listened to Emma, if I had just watched the road, would things be different? My parents called a few times after the funeral. My mother cried and said empty, comforting words, while my father stayed mostly quiet. But I could feel the blame in his voice. "You need to move on, David," my mother said, but I heard the impatience in her voice. Just a few months later, they started asking for money again, like my tragedy was just a small problem in their lives. "We're having money troubles. Can you help us out?" my mother said, her voice sweet like always. I sent them money, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't have the strength to fight anymore. I stopped talking to almost everyone. Old friends, business partners, family members. I didn't answer their phone calls or read their emails. I wanted to be alone, to punish myself with loneliness. In Pine Valley, I kept my conversations with local people very short. They were kind, but I stayed far away from them. I was afraid that if I let them get close, they would see through me and discover the monster who killed his family. I worked on a small piece of land behind my house, planting vegetables, taking care of a few chickens, trying to let hard work and tiredness drown out the thoughts in my head. But at night, when everything was quiet, the memories came back, sharp and cruel. One afternoon, while I was painting my fence, an old man appeared at my gate. He wore work clothes, his gray hair shining in the sun, his eyes bright, but marked with lines from many years of life. "You're the new guy here, right?" he asked, his voice warm and friendly. I nodded, not wanting to say much. He introduced himself as Frank Wilson, a retired teacher who lived in a small cabin nearby. He brought a basket of apples, saying his tree had grown too many. "You look like you could use a friend," he said, his smile gentle but real. I wanted to say no, but something in his eyes made it impossible. Frank became the only person I talked to in Pine Valley. He didn't ask about my past. He didn't judge me. He shared stories of his life, about teaching kids for 40 years, the scars on his heart from losing his wife to cancer, the children who had moved far away and rarely called. He lived alone with an old cat named Whiskers, grew apples and tomatoes, helped neighbors fix things, and wrote in a diary every night to keep his mind healthy. "Sadness didn't kill me," he said once, "and it won't kill you either. You're still breathing, David, which means you still have hope." His words were like a tiny candle in the darkness. I didn't believe I deserved hope, but Frank didn't give up. He visited often, bringing vegetables or just sitting to drink coffee and talk about simple things. He never forced me to talk about my past, but sometimes he looked at me with eyes that seemed to understand everything. Pain is part of being alive, he said one evening as we sat on his porch watching the sunset. But if you let it control your whole life, you've already given up. 3 years passed in Pine Valley, and I was slowly learning a new way to live, even though it was fragile. My days centered around taking care of my small bookstore, from opening the doors at sunrise to closing them when the sun went down. Hard work and exhaustion kept my nightmares further away, though they never completely disappeared. Jake's red sneakers still sat on my table next to our family photo, like symbols of guilt and love I couldn't let go of. I didn't drink as much anymore, thanks to Frank. He never said it directly, but the way he lived, strong and simple, despite his own pain, made me want to try, even just a little, to live better. Frank became my anchor, though I never said it out loud. He shared stories of his students, of lessons learned, of how he dealt with depression by writing and caring for his cat Whiskers. "Write it down, David," he said once, giving me an old notebook. "It doesn't have to be perfect, just honest." I tried, but every time I picked up the pen, I could only write a few lines before the image of Jake's red shoe filled my mind, and I would close the notebook. Frank didn't push me. He would just smile, pat my shoulder, and say, "You'll be ready when the time comes." Something strange happened in the last 2 years. My parents stopped calling me. Before, they would call constantly, always with some reason connected to money. "Just a little bit, David, to help us get through this tough time," Mom would say, her voice sweet but demanding. I would send the money out of habit, though each time it felt like buying temporary peace. Then suddenly, the call stopped. At first, I didn't think much about it. Honestly, I felt relieved, like a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I told myself maybe they had finally learned how to manage their money, or maybe they realized I had nothing left to give. I was wrong. One clear autumn morning, I drove my old pickup truck to take Frank to a doctor's appointment in the next town over. His back hurt from years of standing in classrooms, and I had become his unofficial driver. We talked casually on the way about my bookstore, his cat, and how I should fix my roof before winter came. I drove a little faster than usual on the empty mountain road, not thinking much about it, until flashing police lights appeared in my rear view mirror. I pulled over, sighing. "Probably speeding," I said to Frank, trying to sound casual. He chuckled. "Be careful, David. Don't let them give you a big ticket." The officer, a young man with a serious face, walked up to my truck. "License and registration," he said, his voice flat and professional. I handed them over, thinking it was just a minor ticket, maybe $100 at most. He looked at my license, then at me, then back at the license. His face changed like something was very wrong. "Wait here a moment," he said, walking back to his police car with my license in his hand. A chill ran down my back, though I didn't know why. Frank looked at me, frowning with concern. "Something wrong, David?" "I don't know," I replied, but my heart was beating faster. The officer came back, this time with another police officer. They stood by my truck, talking in quiet voices. Then the first officer looked at me, his eyes full of confusion. "David Martinez, right?" he asked, his voice slow and careful. I nodded, feeling more and more worried. "Can you step out of the truck? We need to have a conversation." I got out, my legs feeling shaky, not from fear of a ticket, but from something in the officer's voice that sounded like the beginning of a new nightmare. Frank watched from the truck, his face full of worry. The officer led me a few steps away and said, his voice quiet like he was trying to stay calm, "According to our records, David Martinez died 2 years ago." I froze like someone had hit me with a baseball bat. "What?" I stammered, my voice breaking. "What are you talking about?" "I'm standing right here." The officer studied my face, his expression mixed with doubt and confusion. "The records show you were declared dead. Death certificate, doctor's signature, everything legal. You need to come with us to the station to figure this out." My head started spinning, the ground under me feeling like it was falling away. I looked back at Frank, who was getting out of the truck with concern written all over his face. "What's happening, David?" he asked, but I couldn't answer. I just shook my head, trying to understand what I had heard. Dead. How could I be dead when I was still breathing, still living, even if my life was just a shadow of what it used to be? On the way to the police station, I sat in the back of the police car with my hands shaking. They didn't put handcuffs on me, but I felt like a criminal. Frank came along, sitting beside me, silent but putting his hand on my shoulder like he was saying he was there for me. My mind swirled with a million questions. A death certificate. Who did this and why? At the station, the atmosphere felt heavy, like a storm was about to hit. The small, cramped room with its gray walls and cold metal table made me feel like I couldn't breathe. Detective Brown, a tall woman with short hair and eyes sharp like a hawk's, sat across from me, looking through a thick file. Frank was allowed to stay, sitting in the corner like a faithful friend, but I still felt crushing loneliness. "Mr. Martinez," Detective Brown began, opening a folder and sliding some papers toward me. "This is your death certificate," she said, her voice calm but serious. "Signed by a doctor in Denver, along with records from the state office. Can you explain why your name is on this?" I looked down at the paper, and my heart seemed to stop beating. My name, my birthday, and a date of death were clearly written there. April 20th, 2 years ago. Cause of death, heart attack. I felt all the blood drain from my face. "This isn't me," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm not dead. I'm sitting right here." Detective Brown looked at me with no emotion on her face. "We know you're sitting here, but according to the system, you're a dead man, and a large life insurance payment was made to the person who gets the money. Do you know who that person is?" I shook my head, but deep in my heart, I was starting to put the pieces together. "My parents," I whispered, my voice breaking. Brown nodded like she already knew the answer. "That's right, Mr. Carlos and Mrs. Maria Martinez. They received $500,000 from the insurance company 2 years ago. And now here you are alive. You understand why we need to clear this up, right?" I swallowed hard, my throat feeling dry like sandpaper. I don't know. They're my parents. They wouldn't." My words trailed off because deep inside, part of me already knew the truth. The silent phone calls, the fake relief when they disappeared from my life. All of it was coming together like pieces of a horrible puzzle. Brown slid another paper toward me. "A report from the FBI Insurance Fraud Unit. We contacted them as soon as we checked your license. They'll be here in a few hours. This isn't a simple mistake, Mr. Martinez. This is organized fraud. FBI." Those letters echoed in my mind like a ticking time bomb. I never imagined I would be involved in something this big. They arrived faster than I expected. 2 agents in dark suits with faces that showed no emotion. The first agent, a man named Agent Rodriguez, sat down next to Brown, opened his laptop, and turned the screen toward me. "We've been investigating your file since the insurance company reported something suspicious," he said, his voice cold but professional. "You bought a large life insurance policy just 6 months before your supposed death. Beneficiaries, your parents. 2 years later, they submitted a fake death certificate, held a private funeral with no body, and collected the money. We have proof." I stared at the screen, and my heart seemed to stop again. It was a series of bank records. $500,000 transferred to my parents' account, then slowly taken out. Some of it went to paying off their restaurant debts. Debts I had once covered, now paid with my own money even though I was still alive. The rest went to a new apartment in a fancy part of Denver, a brand new car, even a cruise to Mexico. I recognized it immediately. These were the things my parents had always wanted, the things they demanded from me with their just to help the family attitude. Now, they had bought them with my death. "This is your family doctor's signature," Rodriguez continued, pointing to a scanned document. "Dr. Peterson, who treated you after your accident 3 years ago. He signed a paper saying you died of heart complications. But your medical records show you only had minor cuts and bruises. And the funeral home, Peaceful Rest, where your wife and son's funeral was held, they filed a private burial report with no body, no grave, no witnesses except your parents." I shook my head, hot tears starting to fall. "No way. They're my parents. After the accident, they came to the hospital. They cried with me. But even as I spoke, I remembered their eyes. Not real sadness, but something else. My father, with his proud attitude, always treating my success like something he deserved. My mother, with her endless shopping bills, always seeing me as a walking wallet." Rodriguez paused, looking at me with a tiny bit of pity. The thing I hated most. "We understand this is hard to hear, but the facts don't lie. We've been watching their bank accounts. They stopped contacting you 2 years ago, right when they got the money. Not because they were sad, Mr. Martinez, but because they thought you were gone forever. Now that you've shown up alive, they'll have to face what they did." I sat in the station's waiting room, Frank by my side, as I told him everything that had happened. He listened without judging, just nodding slowly. "Family isn't always the people you're born to, David," he said. his voice warm like the evenings we spent talking by his fireplace. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stay with you when everything falls apart. His words felt like medicine, but the pain still tore at my heart. I called my parents the first time in 2 years, and my mother's voice came to the phone, first surprised, then scared. "David, you're alive? Oh my God, we thought." My father grabbed the phone, his voice tight with fear. "Don't say anything else. We'll fix this somehow." But I knew there was nothing left to fix. The betrayal was out in the open, raw and cruel. The worst part hit me that night as I lay on a couch in station, unable to sleep. I pictured their faces, my father's proud smile now twisted with fear, my mother's fake tears, not from being sorry, but from fear of losing their new fancy life. I had lost my wife and son because of my own stupid mistake. But the ones who were supposed to love me no matter what, had killed me again for money, not with a car accident, but with lies and greed. I cried, not from pain, but from anger. Anger at myself for trusting them, at them for betraying me, and at life for testing me like this. Frank patted my shoulder as we left the station after a long night, just the two of us walking together. "You survived this, David, and you'll keep going." He was right, but at that moment, I just wanted to disappear again. Yet deep down, a small fire began to burn, not for revenge, but to take back my life. I would face them in court, not because I hated them, but because I deserved to live, to exist, even if only on paper. The investigation moved quickly like a tornado, destroying everything in its path. The FBI searched my parents' apartment in Denver with a court order, finding leftover documents and emails between my father and Dr. Peterson, a secret deal with the funeral home owner. Dr. Peterson, an old man I once trusted, had sold his honesty for a few $1,000s. He confessed quickly, his voice shaking over the phone. "They said you had killed yourself after the accident. They needed money for a proper burial. I was wrong." The funeral home was more stubborn, but security camera footage showed they had staged a funeral with an empty coffin, and only 2 people attending. My parents. In the days that followed, the FBI dug deeper, interviewing my old friends and looking through financial records. They discovered more. My father had used part of the money to pay off secret gambling debts, while my mother bought jewelry and threw expensive parties like she was living in a fairy tale. Each new detail was another stab to my heart, but it also brought clarity. They weren't victims of bad luck. They were people who chose to do wrong. When the day came for their arrest, Rodriguez called me. "They've been caught, Mr. Martinez." They didn't fight back. I picture the scene. My father, the proud man who once criticized me, now in handcuffs in front of the neighbors. My mother crying, but not because she was truly sorry. Their betrayal didn't just steal my identity. It stole my last bit of trust in family. But in that pain, I found new strength. The strength to move forward, to face the coming trial, and finally to be reborn. The FBI stayed in touch regularly, updating me on the case. My parents, Dr. Peterson, and the owner of Peaceful Rest Funeral Home were charged with many crimes: insurance fraud, conspiracy, and stealing someone's identity. Agent Rodriguez, with his cold but determined voice, explained that this was a federal case with possible punishments of many years in prison. "We have solid proof," he said over the phone. "The fake death certificate, bank records, email conversations. All of it points directly to them. But you need to prepare yourself. The trial won't be easy, especially when you have to look at them." The weeks leading up to the trial felt like an emotional hurricane. I returned to my small house in Pine Valley, but it no longer felt like a safe place. Every corner of the house, every pine tree seemed to remind me of the betrayal. I wrote in my journal more, like Frank had taught me, try and put together the broken pieces of my mind. Today I learned that family isn't always the people you share blood with. I wrote, my hand shaking as the pen moved across the paper. Family is the people who choose to stand by you even when you have nothing left. The day of the trial arrived, and the sky was dark with storm clouds, like the heavens were crying for me. The Denver courthouse was a cold building with long hallways, and the sound of shoes clicking on marble floors. I wore an old suit, the only nice clothing left from my former life, but it didn't fit right anymore. My shoulders were smaller, my body chained by years of simple living in Pine Valley. Frank sat beside me in the courtroom, his steady presence like a lighthouse in the darkness. "You're braver than you know," he whispered, and I made fists with my hands to stop them from shaking. My father, Carlos, looked much older, his hair gray and thin, his eyes looking away from mine like I was a ghost he didn't want to see. My mother, Maria, still tried to look elegant in her expensive sweater, but her face was pale and her eyes were red like she'd been crying. They didn't look at me. Not once, even though I sat in the front row. I had hoped, even just a little, that they would look at me with regret, that they would see me, their son, still alive, still breathing. But their silence, the way they kept their heads down like I didn't exist, made me feel like I was truly dead in their eyes, not just on paper. The trial began, and the prosecutor showed all the evidence. They displayed the fake death certificate with Dr. Peterson's signature, emails between my father and the funeral home about the fake funeral, and bank records showing how they spent the insurance money. Each piece of evidence cut deeper into the truth, not just because of the betrayal, but because I realized they felt no shame. I looked at my mother, hoping to see a hint of regret, a sign that she still saw me as her son. But she only kept her head down, wiping her eyes with a tissue, like she was a victim in this story. My father sat up straight, his lips pressed together tight, like he was holding on to his last bit of pride. I wanted to scream, to stand up and ask them, Why could you do this to me? But I just sat there, hot tears streaming down my face, not from pain, but from complete disappointment. When it was my turn to speak to the court, I walked to the witness stand with legs that felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds, feeling like the whole world was watching and judging me. Standing before a room full of strangers, I felt exposed, like every wound in my soul was visible. The prosecutor asked me about my life after the accident, why I left Denver, and why my parents stopped contacting me. I spoke with a voice that shook but was clear about my years in Pine Valley, about how I tried to rebuild my life from nothing, and about the pain of losing Emma and Jake. But when I looked at my parents, my emotions overflowed like a dam breaking. "I supported you for years," I said, my voice choking as tears poured down uncontrollably. "I did everything to help you, even when I lost everything, my wife, my son. But you declared me dead. You chose money over your own son." My father finally looked at me, but his eyes held no regret. "We needed the money, David," he said, his voice cold like he was talking about the weather. "You were useless to us. I thought you'd understand." His words hit like a punch, not just to my face, but to my heart. My mother sobbed, but her words were even crueler. "At least the money wasn't wasted. We lived better lives, David. Can't you see that was good?" I turned away, not wanting them to see me break completely. My tears fell like rain, but not from pain, from anger, from the crushing disappointment of realizing I was never truly their son. I was just a tool to them. And when that tool became broken, they were ready to throw it away. My heart felt like it was being torn apart again. Not because I lost them, but because I lost the last piece of faith in what I once called family. The prosecutor finished asking questions, but I don't remember how I got back to my seat. Frank gripped my hand, saying nothing, but his presence was enough to keep me from falling apart completely. The verdict came at the end of the week. My father received 15 years in prison, my mother 12 years, for insurance fraud and conspiracy. Dr. Peterson lost his doctor's license and was sentenced to 8 years. Peaceful Rest Funeral Home was closed down permanently, its owner receiving 6 years for helping with the crime. As the sentences were read, my parents didn't look at me. They just kept their heads down as they were led away in handcuffs, and I felt a strange emptiness. Justice had been served, but it didn't bring Emma and Jake back. It didn't erase the pain of betrayal. After the trial, I faced a long journey to restore my legal identity. The FBI helped me get a new social security number, driver's license, and bank accounts. Each step was a battle with paperwork and bureaucracy, but when I received my new ID, I held in my hand, feeling like I had been born again. My name, David Martinez, now existed officially again, no longer a shadow in the records of the dead. Frank came to visit me that evening, bringing a bottle of homemade apple cider. We sat on my porch, looking up at the star-filled sky. "You did it, David," he said, his voice warm and steady. "You stood up, faced them, and took back your life." I managed a small smile. "I'm not sure if I really won, Frank, but I'm trying." He nodded, raising his glass of cider. "That's enough, son. That's enough." The night air in Pine Valley always had something peaceful about it. The sound of crickets, singing mixed with the cool breeze, carrying the smell of pine trees and fresh mountain air. I sat there holding my glass of cider, feeling Frank's presence like a strong anchor in the storm I had just survived. The trial was over. My parents and their partners in crime had been punished, and my legal identity had been restored. But the victory didn't bring the happiness I had once imagined. It left only a space, not the emptiness of pain, but a strange feeling of freedom, like I had been released from an invisible cage. In the days that followed, I began to think about the future. The small wooden house in Pine Valley, with its red roof and creaky windows, had been my hiding place for 3 years. But I realized I didn't want to just hide anymore. I wanted to live, really live, not for fame or money, but for what Emma and Jake had once given me: love, joy, and purpose. I wanted to build something not just for myself, but for those around me, the people who had accepted me without needing to know my past. The idea of a community library came to me one morning while I was organizing books at dawn. I wanted to turn my small bookstore into a place where people could come to learn, share, and find the peace I had found in Pine Valley. Not to make money, but to create a community, a new family, not based on blood, but on kindness and support. I shared the idea with Frank, and he let out a hearty laugh, his eyes twinkling. "You're starting over, David. That's something Emma and Jake would be proud of." I got to work. With the money left from selling my company years ago, I bought the building next to my bookstore, renovated it, and built a small area with comfortable chairs and tables for people to gather. I called it New Beginnings Library, a name that sounded simple, but to me it held deep meaning. I hired a few local people to help, and they came with enthusiasm I hadn't expected. Mrs. Johnson from the pharmacy brought homemade cookies to share, and Mr. Thompson from down the street donated an old computer for people to use. Slowly but surely, the library became a part of Pine Valley, a place where people didn't just come to borrow books, but to talk, laugh, and share everyday stories. I hung a framed photo of Emma and Jake in a special corner of the library's main room. Every morning, as I opened the doors, I looked at them and whispered, "I'm trying, my love. I'm trying, buddy." The image of Jake's red sneakers was no longer just a source of pain. It became a reminder that I couldn't waste this second chance. Every book I shelved, every smile I received from the townspeople was a way to make up for the past, to live a life worthy of the love they had given me. Frank became an essential partner. He came to help on weekends despite his old bones not being as strong as they once were. We organized books, fixed shelves, and sat drinking cider on quiet evenings. "You and I are similar, David," he said one night as we sat by a small heater. "We've both been hurt badly, but we still choose to get back up. That's what makes us human." The people of Pine Valley started to see me as one of their own. They no longer looked at me with curiosity or pity. Instead, they called me David from the library. And every time I heard that name, I felt like I was starting to belong somewhere again. One afternoon, as I helped Mrs. Johnson arrange cookies on a shelf, she took my hand and said, "You've brought something wonderful to this town, David. Thank you." I just smiled, not sure how to respond. But inside, I felt an acceptance I hadn't known since leaving Denver. Life at the library wasn't always easy. There were days when the heater broke and we were cold. Nights I stayed awake, haunted by memories of Emma and Jake. But I no longer ran from the pain. I learned to face it, to let it become a part of me, but not the whole of who I am. Frank taught me that life isn't about erasing the past, but about learning to live with it and turning it into fuel to move forward. Following Frank's advice, I reflected on my journey from the successful days in Denver to the edge of tragedy, to the years of hiding in Pine Valley, and now a new beginning. I had lost everything, not just once, but twice. First Emma and Jake, because of my own mistake, then my identity because of the greed of those I once called family. But in those ashes, I found lessons carved into my soul, lessons I want to share, not to preach, but to remind myself, and perhaps you too. Family isn't always the people you're born to. I once thought my parents, despite being selfish and demanding, still loved me in their own way. But their betrayal, declaring me dead to collect insurance money, showed me the harsh truth. They chose money over me, and that hurt more than any physical wound I'd ever had. But in Pine Valley, I found a new family. Frank, with his teaching stories and quiet strength, became like a father to me. Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Thompson, and the townspeople, with their unconditional kindness, gave me a community to belong to. True family is the people who choose to stay by your side even when you have nothing left to offer. Money can buy comfort, but it can never buy honor. My parents used the insurance money to pay off debts, buy an apartment, buy a car, live a life they thought they deserved. But the cost was their integrity, their humanity, and ultimately their own freedom. I had once been caught up in the world of money and success, thinking they would bring happiness. But when I lost Emma and Jake, I realized that no amount of money, no success could replace the love and presence of those you care about. Life truly begins only when you face the truth, no matter how painful it is. I ran away from Denver, from the pitying stares and blaming whispers, thinking isolation would help me forget. But the truth never disappears. It waits, patient and merciless, until you have the courage to confront it. When I stood in court looking at my parents and hearing them justify their betrayal, I realized that living in lies might be easier, but it never brings peace. Only when I accepted the past, my mistakes, my guilt, and their betrayal, did I find the path to move forward. Don't trade love and family time for work or money. If I had listened to Emma, if I had hung up the phone that day, perhaps I would still have her and Jake with me. One moment of carelessness took everything away, and I'll live with that pain until my last breath. I once thought work was the center of the universe, that success would define me. But success doesn't hold you when you cry. It doesn't hold your hand when you're scared. It doesn't laugh with you in the sunshine. Only family does that. And I learned this lesson at the highest possible price. Be careful of greed, even from the closest people. When it comes to money and possessions, human nature can reveal itself in ways you never expect. My parents, whom I once thought would always protect me, chose money over their son. They weren't evil monsters. They were just human, weak, and easily tempted. But that truth doesn't make the pain any lighter. It only teaches me that trust, even in blood relatives, must be earned. And above all, if you're still breathing, you still have a chance. Frank said this to me, and I listened, though it took years to believe it. I lost my wife and son, lost my reputation, There were nights I thought I couldn't continue, that death would be easier. But every morning as the sun rose over the pine-covered mountains, I found a reason to get up. A chance isn't about getting back what's lost, but about building something new, a life that's imperfect but worth living. One afternoon, as I was closing New Beginnings Library, I stood quietly in front of the framed photo of Emma and Jake. The sunset came through the window, lighting up their smiles, and I felt my heart grow lighter. I was no longer the David Martinez of Denver, the man with big dreams and even bigger mistakes. I was David of Pine Valley, the man learning to live again, day by day, moment by moment. I whispered to them, my voice shaking but determined. I lost everything, but I also found myself again. Frank walked in carrying a basket of fresh apples from his tree. Talking to them again? He asked with a gentle smile. I nodded, smiling back. They're my guiding light, Frank, and so are you. He laughed warmly, patting me on the back. Well, that's good to hear. Now, let's get some more cider. Tonight we celebrate. I did as he suggested, and as we sat under the star-filled sky, I felt a deep peace. New Beginnings Library, Pine Valley, Frank, and all the simple people around me. They were my new family. Proof that life, no matter how painful, is still worth living. I had lost everything, but I also found a new path. And as long as I breathe, I'll keep walking it, carrying the love of Emma and Jake and the reminder that no matter how dark the night gets, the dawn is always there, waiting for me to find it.